Hello. Welcome back to another episode of The Elements of Success. I am your host, Safriana Luna. And as always, it's a delight to be here with you for my favorite show, for my favorite program here to talk about my seasons framework and the gifts that come from the elements, from magic, from diving into yourself. And today we are talking about one of my very favorite topics on the whole planet, which is the gift of shadow. I think shadow is just such a misunderstood topic, and I can't wait to dive into it with you today. But just in case this is your first time stumbling across me, I am Safriana Luna, the Queer Spirit Guide. I am a licensed clinical trauma therapist and a mentor, a priestess of brigade, a druid, all kinds of things. And I started my professional career as a public school teacher. So I love to have the opportunity to teach. And before we move fully into our next topic, I just want to rewind, touch base back about the topic we just wrapped up, which is expanding our influence as we take ownership. So we wrapped up the ownership arc talking about how we really move out into the world and have an even bigger influence. So I just want to check in. Did you practice accountability in the last couple of weeks, even in a small way? And if so, what did that feel like to really be accountable to yourself, to others, to projects, to whatever that might have looked like? And then what came up when you sat with the question, what does it mean to be a good ancestor? Right. And I really talked about how we are all an ancestor to someone, even if we do not have children ourselves. We are still ancestors here on this planet, sharing this beautiful planet across generations. So we want to be the best ancestors we can be for future generations. Now, the ownership work that we've done has prepared us for what comes next. And now we're going to go even deeper into what lives in the dark, waiting for us to welcome it home. Like I said, this is one of my absolute favorite topics. So I might go off on some tangents. We'll see. I might repeat myself. We'll see. But let's just start with what is shadow. Shadow is the unseen. It's our subconscious. I sometimes call it the lunar dimension of self. If the sun is the light, the moon is more of our shadow. And the reason I describe it that way is that our shadow is very much variable. It goes through phases, it shifts. And sometimes the shadow is very close to the light, and sometimes the shadow is very deep down in the dark. Just like the moon has a dark face and a light face, the moon goes through these phases, and that very much depicts our relationship with shadow. So, unseen, subconscious, but we can make it seen and we can make it conscious. That's the cool thing of doing shadow work. Carl Jung described shadow as everything that we've pushed out of sight, not because it's unworthy, but because we have been taught that it is unwelcome. Cannot tell you how many people I know that just have this awful relationship with any shadow aspects of themselves, any parts of themselves that they've learned to reject, any parts of themselves that they've come into a story that part is shameful or wrong or bad or disappointed somebody, or they're afraid of that aspect of themselves. These parts get pushed out of sight and become unwelcome, but they're still there and they're still operating under the surface. So shadow is necessary for wholeness. It's one half of our equation, and it holds what we have been taught to exile. Again, not what's truly unworthy. And I literally have written a book. Yes, it's in within reach. This book, Shadow Alchemy, was a book that was born out of me writing about the shadow light dance. And the tagline is how to turn your inner darkness to gold. There is so much gold, so much fertile, rich material in our shadow that we end up avoiding because we're scared of what we might find there, or we're ashamed of what we know is there, or again, we've experienced some disappointments and we've shoved things down so deep. but gold lives in the darkness. We've talked quite a bit throughout this series about parts, how parts protect us. Many of our shadows are protectors. They don't form randomly. They went underground to keep us safe. They were parts that may have been fully expressed at one point in time, but due to outside influences and circumstances, we put those parts down in the dark. We exiled them to the bottom of the ocean. We sent them away. We locked the cage that they were in and we threw away the key. Unfortunately, when it doesn't feel safe to express our needs, our emotions, our desires, or our truths, those parts get shoved down. They don't disappear. They just go into hiding and they end up waiting for the moment that we're ready to welcome them back. Our other parts, our other protective parts, end up standing in the way to guard those exiles, to guard those shadows, which can make them hard to retrieve. So I really want you to walk away with the understanding that shadows are not your enemy, but they are sometimes actually protectors that learned to do their work in the dark, learned to do their work in your subconscious, learned to do the work without being seen. So, how do we how do we work with this? We don't want to live in the shadows. We don't want to be consumed by shadow work all the time or be down in the pits all the time, right? And we're going to get into the breadth of the definition of shadow later. But when we are working with shadows, we want to not be stuck. We don't want to end up trapped in despair, anger, depression. We don't want to get trapped in a really hardcore emotion. That's not the point. The point is to visit and get to know the parts of us that are residing in shadow. So, what we want is intentional exploration with curiosity and compassion. What are these parts of me needing? What's down here in the dark? What could I find here? Really getting curious. Ooh, wow, there's that memory that really stings. Why did that sting so much? How can I give this part of me some love? Going into your shadow while already resourced and being able to come back to center. We want to be able to do that. We don't want to overload the system. And integration, bringing what you find from the shadow back into the light. That is our ultimate goal. It's like we are spelunkers and we're going down and we're retrieving some form of treasure and we're coming back up into the light and being like, wow, look at this thing that I found. What we don't want is the living in the shadow. This is when we're consumed by our unconscious patterns. We lose ourselves in our old wounds without a path back because we're not resourced going in. And we identify so completely with the pain that it becomes our identity. That's not what we want. That's living in shadow, right? Living in shadow can very quickly end up looking like we are existing in a victim mindset. And we have all survived some shit, right? We're alive right now. We've all survived some shit. Let's be real. We all have our traumas and our trials that we've been through. We've all probably been victimized at some point in time, but we don't want to be stuck in that mindset that life is all shadow and that we're all pain and that there's nothing to do but suffer and try to heal or fix it. Instead, we get curious. We go in with compassion. We get resourced first. We don't force the shadow work. We don't force it before we're ready, and we don't do it all the time. We do it when we can be intentional, when we can be compassionate and curious, and when we know we can go in there with the right tools, retrieve what we need to retrieve, and then come back up. We want to visit. So, the protective shadow, we talked a little bit about these protective parts, but I just want to rehash for the shadow, how do these protective shadows form? When parts are pushed underground over time, these are the subconscious protective shadows, what went into hiding because it had to. These usually happen because of denied needs. So if your needs go unmet long enough, they don't disappear, you just suppress them. So those needs go underground and they get expressed sideways through things like self sabotage, manipulation, resentment, numbing, etc. The need is still there. It's just under the surface, and it's almost like it's trying to crack up the trap door to get out, which comes out sideways, right? It ends up, we say things we don't mean. We do things that we don't mean. We end up projecting on other people. We sabotage our success, all in the name of trying to get our needs met. So we want to be able to acknowledge those needs in the first place. And that's what next episode is really going to be about, is that shadow is associated with our needs. Early stories and limiting beliefs, those do so much to us. So if you hear messages like "you're too much," "that's not for people like us," these sorts of messages begin to shape your behavior and what you learn to hide over time. Unfortunately, this means that over time they calcify into shadow material in the background. These limiting beliefs become those subconscious programs that are just running the show and you don't even realize. And then finally, cultural conditioning. So, capitalism teaches us to hide our need for rest. Patriarchy teaches us to hide vulnerability and our bodies and all other manners of authenticity. Purity culture teaches us to hide desire, our body wisdom, our bodies as well. And these sorts of forces, these are just a couple of examples, end up shaping what we believe is acceptable to be, how it's acceptable to show up in the world. But we're just meant to be ourselves. So this is really not great, right? When we have this core, beautiful, authentic self that comes out as a child and we're expressing and we're fully embodied, and then trauma, generational wounds, family stories, cultural conditioning, it starts to stack on. And those parts of us that were once vibrant and shiny and bright and we knew to be us get pushed underground. The simplest example I can think of is how I spent so much time in nature when I was a very little child. And then as soon as I started public school and the demands became, oh, you have homework now. You need to get your homework done. You have a project to do. You have a paper to write. I drifted further and further away from nature because of all of the conditioning and the expectations that were placed on me by the adults around me, the system that had been built long before I existed. And so I lost that connection. I retreated into myself. I shoved down the parts of me that just wanted to play because now I needed to be productive. So there's so much reclamation work that we get to do in this. And getting further, deeper into the weeds, right? Oppression and marginalization. So, marginalized people often need to hide much more than those of dominant culture. So, if you are a cisgender, which means that you agree with the gender you were assigned at birth or the sex that you were assigned at birth, and you're like, yes, that's me. That's all that cisgender means. If you're heterosexual, which means that you're attracted to only the opposite sex. If you are white, if you are Christian, if you grew up in a decent socioeconomic background, or you got a good education, those are privileged statuses. Now, anybody, like I am a white person and I'm queer. So I have privilege from being a white person. I have marginalization status from being a queer person. I still have privilege. We all have, arguably, not all of us, most of us have some privilege. And we want to leverage that privilege to make the world a better place for everyone. But when we lack that privilege, when we end up in marginalization, when we are bullied, even, we learn to hide who we are. We shove those parts of us down. So queer people learn to hide who they love. People of color learn to hide their anger, their emotions, the very justified feelings they have. Disabled people learn to hide their needs. And the shadow is forced. It's forced and it carries extra weight because it was never ours to carry in the first place. So these sorts of cultural, societal judgments end up being protective shadows that form that might think there's something wrong with us, or that might simply be like, I'm not safe enough to show this to the world. Again, example, when I was a public school teacher, I was not out about being queer at all because it was not safe to do so. I saw routinely from my colleagues derogatory remarks about queer people and derogatory statements about students who were exploring their identity. And so that showed me it was not safe. And it showed me I needed to be a safer space for those kids too. But that's besides the point. These protective shadows form for a reason. And the final one I want to touch on today is the collective shadow. This gets back into that sort of Jungian psychology, but it's also very much my role in the world, which is calling out the collective patterns. Cultures carry shadows too. What a society refuses to examine gets carried by the individuals within it. Need I say anything right now about what is happening in US politics to see this is God, I can't even talk. The shadows that society refuses to examine, and the systems refusing to examine shadows perpetuate them. And so we have all these cultural shadows around things like race, gender, sexuality, class or socioeconomic status, your ability. All of this shows up in policy, in silence, and in what is considered quote unquote normal. So it's so important to remember that personal shadow work and collective shadow work are inseparable because the individual creates the collective and the collective creates the individual. There's no weeding it out. So, one of the things I always say is the most important thing you can do is your work. Every piece of shadow that we carry was once a need, a truth, or a gift that did not have a safe space to land. So, just remember again, your shadows themselves are not the enemies. Now, very excited to teach about this. I mentioned the book Shadow Alchemy. This is a multi-authored book I was in, and it was inspired by my teaching on the shadow light dance, which I call Shadow Alchemy. And I teach in it about what I call the energetic spectrum, or the spectrum of energetic harmony to disharmony. And I'm going to teach this in this program, but today we're just looking at the shadow. So I just want you to kind of have a heads up of where we're going. The spectrum of energetic harmony to disharmony is a map. It is sort of a map of our collective and individual consciousness, where we are in the infinity dance of the shadow light dance. Both the shadow and the light have an aligned, neutral, and unaligned expression. The light is not better than the shadow, and the shadow is not worse than the light. They both have gifts and challenges and a neutral state. So I really want, if there's one thing to walk away with, if there was one teaching I could offer the world, it would be to be in the dance without resisting the shadow. Shadow is not automatically bad. Light is not automatically good. Where you are in this spectrum is information. It's not something to judge. So, the spectrum of neutral shadow, we're going to just start there today. Neutral shadow is healthy and natural. It's simply the unseen dimension of the self. Our subconscious, what operates below awareness, our imagination, our creative depths, our intuition, or our knowing without knowing how we know, subtle passive healing, what happens when we rest and just allow things to unfold. And again, this sort of lunar energy, we might call it feminine energy or fem energy. It's receptive, it's cyclical, it's inward, it is luscious, it's just a beautiful energy. Again, there's nothing wrong with neutral shadow. This is part of being human. We all possess a subconscious. We are all intuitive in some way. We all possess an imagination. We all heal in the background. And we all do have a quote unquote feminine energy within us, though I strongly dislike using the gendered terms because society has placed stories on what that means. But the qualities of receptivity, our cyclical nature, and our ability to drop down deep within ourselves and retrieve information. The aligned shadow. So this is the gift. These are the gifts of the shadow that I want you to know are available to you, because where we go next, the unaligned, is what people normally think of. So aligned shadow is where integration leads us. It's what becomes possible when we do the work of actually welcoming these shadows home into ourselves. So, the aligned shadow looks like boundaried and grateful receiving. So, we don't just receive everything, we receive within our boundaries. We're willing to engage with our feelings and our inner experiences. You drop in and you feel your emotions, you feel your life force moving through you, you feel that inner world just sourcing information and being with you. That's the shadow. The aligned shadow is where we explore our soul level desires. Desire lives in the shadow. So if we're rejecting the shadow outright, we are also rejecting our desires. So exploring our soul level desires exists in the shadow. Constructive self reflection. This is where ownership can take place too. We've talked about ownership in our last arc, how important it is to really own what is ours, to own what is ours to claim, to own what is ours to do. So that constructive self reflection allows us to go, oh, yeah, that is mine. Or, it's not mine. That's a projection. That's a societal thing. It's not mine. But here's what I do want to do with it, right? Aligned shadow is one of the most empowering places in the entire spectrum. It is the fruit of shadow work done with love. This is the place where the gifts come up and where your needs are made known. So, again, those soul level desires, they exist in the shadow. So, if you cut that off, you are cutting off your desire. Now, finally, the unaligned shadow. This is what most of us know about. This is what we think of when we think of the shadow. And it is, of course, where we feel stuck. Our unaligned shadows are protective shadows that have not been witnessed or integrated yet. So the good news is they can become aligned. But this looks like wounded subconscious beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm too much. I'll never be loved. I'll never be seen as whole. I'm not someone without someone else. These sorts of things. Disconnection or underfunctioning. When we are underfunctioning, we can't live our lives. We can't face what's in front of us. And that is definitely some shadow material. Repressed desires and repressed emotions live here, and it's not great to repress them. There's a big difference. I'm going to talk about this really quick because I feel this is important. We've talked before, I believe, about the spectrum of dissociation and how we all dissociate. It is 100% natural and normal for us to dissociate. We get in a car accident, we're rear-ended, we might feel angry, we might feel shocked, we might feel scared. We got to get out. We got to make sure the other person's okay. We got to get the insurance information. We might have to call the police. There's all these things to do. We temporarily pop off our emotion over there. And ideally, if we're healthy, at the end of the day, when we have time to process it, we bring it back in and we go, oh my gosh, that was so scary. And I felt all these feelings and blah, 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 blah. And then we reintegrate and we move on. It only gets messy and in the unaligned shadow territory when we keep repressing them. We never bring the emotions back. So in fact, before I went live today, I've had some major life circumstances happening over here lately that I'm not going to get into. But I was looking through some things and I stumbled across something that brought up these big emotions, like big emotions. I was like, I'm teaching elements of success in less than 20 minutes. It is not the time to sit here and have like a full-blown ball fest about all the feelings that are coming up right now. However, it is also not the correct choice to repress these completely and shove them away and pretend they don't exist. So I acknowledged it in the moment. I went, wow, these are really big feelings and I need to feel this. And I don't have the room right now to give myself the full time to feel it because I am in the middle of my workday and I have things to do and it's not an emergency. I need to go cancel my work. It's my emotions and they come and go. So rather than repressing them, I'm going to feel them later. I'm going to bring them back in, pop them back off from the side and integrate them through some journal, through some movement. When we continually repress those emotions, we repress those desires, again, they come out sideways. And I personally definitely know what it is like to repress emotions and have them burst out in passive aggressiveness or in frustration, right? And sometimes that's because we're not being listened to. And sometimes it's because we've been repressing them ourselves so long that we haven't been expressing them until they literally bubble up and burst out. So ownership is key, but we cannot repress our desires and feelings and expect life is just going to be hunky dory. It will burst out. When we over identify with our feelings, that also can be that unaligned shadow, right? If earlier I had fully leaned into the feelings that were coming up and be like, this is my whole life now, and I'm just going to feel this deep sorrow all the time, and I need to cry, and I need to, whoa, right? We can literally think, I am sadness, I am anger, when we're saying, like, I'm so angry, I'm this, I'm that. Sometimes we're over identifying with the emotion. I'm experiencing this thing right now. I'm experiencing this emotion. These feelings are coming up. They are feelings that come and go. This relationship of the flow of emotions, that's where we get to get curious about how we can change that so that we can see the feeling almost like another part and go, hi, I see you, I witness you, and I can give you attention right now, I can give you attention later, whatever we need to do to reassure those parts of ourselves. We're not going to continue to repress them. We're going to meet their needs. Fear and insecurity. I know all about fear. Fear and insecurity are unaligned shadow, right? It's this belief that something's wrong. I'm wrong. Something's going wrong. I don't have control. What do I do? And that can absolutely get us spun up in that unaligned shadow for a very long time, feeling stuck. Trauma stories, limiting beliefs, and wounds. As I've said, we all have our traumas. Some of us have more visceral traumas, I'll call them, than others. Some of us have experienced some really hardcore stuff, and different traumas have different impacts on every person. I could experience something that was exact same incident as you and have a completely different response internally. But the trauma stories, the limiting beliefs that stem out of the things that we've endured against our consent, against our will, out of our control, and the wounds that stem from them end up being this very, very, I'm going to call it dark, fertile soil for more stories and limitations and wounds to arise. And that's why it's important that we we tune into these parts rather than repress them, because when we repress them, we are perpetuating that outside pattern. Unconscious motivations. So our subconscious desire to manipulate, to control the situation, to do whatever we need to do to keep it together. Those exist in the unaligned shadow as well. And then finally, I've mentioned it before, the victim mentality. So your reminder here is that all of these sort of behaviors or aspects are simply invitations. When these things come up, these patterns, they're invitations to see the parts within you that need your attention. If you have a wound surfacing, that wound would like your attention. If you have a negative belief surfacing, that negative belief would like your attention. If you are popping up a subconscious story, it's showing up in your dreams again and again and again, it is a part trying to get your attention to be seen. So this is why I will literally put my hand out in front of me all the time and I pretend that this is the part of me I'm talking to. I externalize it. Hey, I see you. What's going on in there? How can I assist? I know it sounds a little crazy, right? But that's part of getting the parts out of us so we don't over identify with them, so we can get some discernment. What is here that I need to bring up into the light? What is here that I need to process? What is here that I need to be tender with? Listening to the prompts, not giving into them and over identifying with them and being in the victim mindset for forever, but going, oh, wow, right? The situation that came up right before I got on today, I was like, wow, there is still a charge here for me to witness. There is still a part of me that has big feelings about this situation. That's an invitation for me to go back in and give that part of me some gentle love. So, the full spectrum preview, like I said, I will be talking more in future episodes about this full spectrum, but really, I want you to picture it as this infinity symbol. On one side, you have the shadow, on the other side, you have the light, and we're weaving in and out of it. This is the shadow light dance. For now, what I want you to know is this: we are all moving through all positions on the spectrum: aligned, unaligned, neutral, shadow, light. Moving into disharmony and back into harmony is very human. The goal is not perfection. It is simply for you to be aware and fluid, allowing yourself to keep flowing instead of getting stuck in one little part. And this map is sort of our guide through shadow, needs, light, and self-care, and the dance between them as we wrap up the elements of success. These are our last two real arcs. Isn't that wild? So, working with the shadow, we want to really invite in that compassion. The compassion is the greatest key, but examination, that careful inner reflection. Shadow alchemy is not just us sitting there and analyzing and judging the hell out of our parts. Nor does alchemy come with avoiding and suppressing or repressing our stuff either. It occurs through careful examination and gentle compassion. So we witness what's here. We witness what's in the shadows without trying to fix it, force it, or shame it away. We bring our curiosity rather than our critique. So we might ask, like, what are you protecting rather than what's wrong with you or what's wrong with me? Just, okay. And again, you might even pull your hand out here so you can externalize it. What are you protecting me from? Scared part. What are you protecting me from? Fear part, sad part, shame part, etc. Not what's wrong with you. Why are you feeling this? Instead, what's going on? How do I help? This is the process. See it, be with it, offer it love. See the shadow, be with the shadow, offer it love. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to change it. You just have to be compassionate with it. And suddenly things will start to thaw. They'll start to open. They'll start to shift. So compassion is key. You'll hear me say it a billion times if you hang out with me long enough. And I mentioned the gold in the darkness. So when the shadow is integrated, it reveals what I call the sensuous underbelly of the light. I have a painting I did actually, which I can't necessarily show live because it's kind of a nude portrait, but the sensuous underbelly of the light came out of that painting. The reality that what we see on the surface is the light. What we see on the surface is the light. And underneath it, in the underbelly, is this sensuality, this softness, this lushness, this unlimited possibility that exists in the fertile, dark, rich soil of the shadow. So, again, contrary to our popular narrative, the shadow isn't bad. As I just pointed out in the spectrum, there are these beautiful gifts in it. There's so much information. It's this rich, textured, powerful dimension of self that is only accessible to us when we stop running from it, when we stop fearing this quote unquote dark within us and instead embrace it. Sure, it's not all going to be comfortable, but when you actually pluck those shadows up, you see them, you play with them, you witness them, you integrate them, you learn their gifts, you feel so empowered. I laugh all the time now. I'll be like, "Whoo, we're in the shadow side of the spectrum right now." And like I can have some levity and some understanding with it because I know I'm not going to be stuck there for forever. I know that I can integrate the shadows, that there's some new gem of information coming forward for me. And when you can know that in your bones, you know that in your soul that, okay, we're in the dance and we're slipping and sliding down to the shadow side of the spectrum, like it removes this pressure that society places on us to be in the light always. It is essential that you remember that your exiled parts carry so much wisdom, creativity, strength, and truth that your conscious self has been missing because of that natural repression for safety. But do you really need that anymore? Do you really need that form of quote unquote safety anymore? Is repressing it really helping you the way that you thought it was? What you've been hiding often holds the key to who you came here to be. Because, of course, the first part of us to run away is the part that our soul came here to be, is the part that is most authentic to you, the parts that hold all of your beauty and your creativity and your wisdom and your shine. Of course, when you're wounded, those are the first parts to run away in fear and hide and to be protected by other parts of you. But they're also who you came here to be. So you want to liberate them from the shadow so that they can be in you, through you, what you came here to be. It's the gems of shadow. I love the idea of going into the shadow to retrieve gems. Here's what becomes possible. When you start to welcome your shadow home, you gain access to the gifts, all the gifts that the light alone cannot count for and cannot offer, even. Deep intuition. Deep intuition lives well below the rational mind. The rational mind very much in the light. When you receive an intuitive hit, it is often from the most subconscious, subtle places. You can't get that by just being in the light. Authentic creativity is expression that comes from your whole self, not just the quote unquote acceptable self, but all of you. That is, I love writing and exploring all of my shadows through characters, through poetry, through essay. It's so much fun. It would be so flat if we stayed in the light, because again, the light is what you can see. It is the seen dimension, and what's seen is not always great. Authenticity is routed in wholeness, and we are the shadow and the light. Profound empathy exists in the shadow. Because when you've actually been with your own pain, you can truly be with another's. When we avoid our pain, we often avoid the pain of others. When we don't want to admit to our own hurt, we often struggle to admit the hurt of others. Or when we're so embroiled in our hurt that we are in that like barbed, everything happens to me, everybody's out to get me mode, like there's also no empathy in that because we are on the defensive. So when we can really sit with our own pain, we can really be with another's. And that is when empathy and practice comes in. Of course, there's empathy, the gift, that's a whole other conversation, but intellectual empathy, understanding empathy, that we can put ourselves in someone else's shoes. Embodied power comes from the shadow. We have strength rooted in our wholeness, not our performance. And the shadow, which is so often repressed, leads to the performance because the subconscious need to fit in and belong and not be abandoned ends up coming up into running a program in the light where we perform and we chase perfectionism because we think that that is what is going to cause us to maintain love. When we bring our shadows home, we have a capacity for real intimacy. When nothing is hidden, connection deepens. Now, obviously, we don't air all of our quote unquote dirty laundry to every person we encounter. There is such a thing as building trust and not just dumping on people and all of that. But if we are suppressing our shadow, if we are rejecting those subconscious, tender parts of ourselves, if we are rejecting our exiles, we are not going to be able to be in an intimate relationship with someone else, like a real intimate relationship, because intimacy is founded on realness. It's founded on truth. It's founded on trust. And when we can be with someone and not hide ourselves, when we can be with ourselves and not hide ourselves, we open that capacity for deeper connection. And then again, soul level desires. I have such a soul level desire to write. Like, I love to write. It is my greatest just passion and joy. I get so lit up by even thinking about it. It is a soul level desire, knowing exactly what you want, Not what you were taught to want. I was not taught to want to write at all. I was taught to want to make a lot of money and get a good job and have kids and buy the house and have the white picket fence and all of those things. It's not my soul level desire at all. My soul level desire is to write and to play and to support other people in being themselves. That's my soul level desire. So, what do you actually want? You can only find that when you really dive into the shadow. Your greatest power does not lie in avoiding the darkness. It comes from using it as a backdrop against which you can see the stars, where your deepest truths shine brightest. And the quote that's actually on the page there, I believe, is actually a fully direct quote from my chapter, where I wrote, when I wrote Shadow Alchemy. But I really want you to see that. Imagine the dark sky at night. It's midnight, there's no moon shining, and all you can see is the hundreds of thousands of millions of billions of stars out there that you can't even begin to fathom how many. That's the shadow. You can only see the stars because the dark backdrop exists. So allow the shadows to rise, to be in your consciousness, to exist in front of you in a point of awareness where you can actually point out, oh, and there's that gem and that gem and that gem and that gem, like diamonds in the midnight sky. And once again, we can't run away from the sensuous underbelly of the light. It's just my favorite thing. It's not the opposite of light. Shadow is not the opposite. It is its partner. Without shadow, light would be flat. We wouldn't really be able to see things without the contrast and the contours that exist because of the relationship of shadow and light. So play with that. Play with your shadow. Play with your actual shadow. Maybe go outside in the sun and play with your shadow. It might be fun. It might teach you something. Play with the symbolism. But at its core, without the unseen, the seen has no dimension. Without the subconscious, the conscious has no roots. And without receiving, giving becomes depletion. Again, the shadow is where we receive. If you have issues with shadow, you might have issues with receiving. Receiving genuine love, receiving care, receiving resources, receiving your wants being met. The shadow is the sensuous place where those desires exist. And shadow gives light its richness. It is the sensuous underbelly, the felt, the intuited, the deeply known, deeply felt. The parts of you that make your presence magnetic, your are honest, and your love real. So that is why shadow's a gift. What lives in the dark is as sacred as what lives in the light. It lives in you. So allow your shadow to have life and allow yourself the point of awareness to be aware of it. And that's exactly where I think we're going to go now. So we're going to drop into a moment of meditation here. And as we drop into our meditation, I'm just going to invite you to start with the breath as an anchor. Just taking a few nice, nourishing inhales and allowing your exhales to soften you, allowing your shoulders to drop away. And as you breathe, I invite you to imagine you are sinking like a stone all the way down from your thinking mind into the sacral pool. So all the way down from your mind, from your brain, drifting your awareness, your consciousness down through the body, all the way down into the bowl in your pelvis, down into your low body, down into the sensuous underbelly, down into the dark, still points within you. And just breathe. Breathe down deep. Sourcing life from the dark, fertile soil within. You might have been afraid to be with the shadow in the past. Today, I don't want you to go chasing a shadow or intellectualizing it or thinking over much about it. I just want you to sit in the shadow, in the stillness, in the sensuous underbelly, just for a moment, in the stillness and the silence, sitting in the shadow, just for a moment. Noticing if the thoughts start to race, if the body establishes any sensations, just noticing what's here. As you even think about being with the shadow, as you invite the shadow to sit with you, within you. And what's your relationship with your shadow been like? Do you reject it? Do you embrace it? Do you pretend it doesn't exist? How can you make room to explore your desires? How can you create space to go within and retrieve the gems from the darkness? How can you prioritize your emotional needs? And whatever's here now, knowing that there does not need to be a perfect answer, just honoring what's here. And then once again, just shifting the attention back into that pelvic bowl, that low spot in the body where you can sink in, settle inward, and feel the presence of the shadow within you. Maybe today brought you another level of awareness of your shadow, maybe a new possibility of being with it, perhaps ideas for a new practice or permission to explore something new. And whatever is here, just honoring it as we begin the process of shifting back up into the light, back into the body, maybe wiggling from side to side, maybe rolling the shoulders, wiggling the fingers and toes. And if the eyes were closed, gently blinking them open. And taking a moment here to do a nice no tiger twist. Looking behind you, above you, slowly twisting to take in your space. I know there wasn't a super specific practice today. The invitation is just to be aware that the shadow is here, that we can sit with it, that we can have a still moment and drop in to just see what's there, to invite in some awareness. But as always, I have an invitation for you this week. So, invitation for integration. Where do you recognize yourself on that spectrum right now? Are you in neutral shadow? The shadow's not doing too much. It's just your subconscious, it's your intuition, it's doing its thing. Are you in your aligned shadow and you're really retrieving great information? You're in the sensuous underbelly. You're living your soul level desires. You are, doing it up. You're doing the most for yourself with the information of what your soul's calling for. Or are you more in that unaligned shadow where you are spinning maybe in some old wounds? There's stories coming up. Maybe you're repressing some things and that's becoming challenging. No judgment. Just notice and remember this is a spectrum. So you can go from one end of the spectrum to the other. You can be somewhere in between. Ideally, we move towards more aligned shadow and neutral shadow, and we begin to release the unaligned shadow. But we're human, so we're always going to have it there. It's always going to crop back up. The more compassionate, curious, and grace giving we can be with ourselves, the better off we'll be. And then just reflect on this. What have you been taught to hide? What gift might be waiting for you there underneath what was hidden? Again, I was taught to hide my writing. I was taught to hide my queerness. I was taught to hide my spirituality. I was taught to hide my body. I was taught to hide most of me. I definitely grew up with the mentality of, be seen, not heard, and look pretty, but don't speak out of turn, and just all of these limiting narratives that came from culture and society and were passed down from generation to generation. So many of us are unhooking from those stories now. And I'm excited for that. But in the meantime, we have to continue to ask the question, like, what have I been forced to hide? What have I suppressed? What parts of me have I thrown away because I was told that they didn't have value? It might be time to dive in and retrieve those parts now. They are needed more than ever. So we have kicked off our final arc, which is our shadow and light arc of the elements of success. Next time we'll move into, what we've named what lives in the shadow. Next we'll move into retrieving it through our practical language of needs. So we'll talk about how needs are the direct path to shadow retrieval, what went underground, how we bring it back home. We'll talk about excavating our needs across at least 4 domains: physical, emotional, spiritual, and creative. We'll talk about the language of needs. I'll give you a little brief introduction to nonviolent communication. We'll talk about the courage to voice your needs without shame or blame, and cultural humility and how our needs are communicated across different contexts. So, again, the shadow work of this episode named what was hidden, just giving some voice to that. The next episode is all about finding the tools to reclaim the shadow in the name of our needs. So it's a little bit sad to me that we only have about 6, 7 episodes left after this, maybe less. I'm really bad at math sometimes, but we are winding down on this long journey that we've been on as we dive into my favorite topic last of the shadow light dance. But I can't wait to be back here with you again for our next lesson. In the meantime, please take this as an invitation to go play with your shadow, to be in a new relationship with your shadow, to get curious about what it might look like, what is hidden in the sensuous underbelly of the light. I'm really curious to know. So as always, you are welcome to email me at guide@safriana.com anytime that you want to share. You're welcome to join me in community. You're welcome to hang out wherever I hang out. I love to encourage you. I love to cheer you on. I love to support you however I can. So until next time, I see you, I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on, my friends. Bye for now.